turn to the next blank page in your journal, put today's date at the top, and put a full title on the top, which is Lesson 3-2, Adding and Subtracting Fractions with Unlike Denominators. Here are your steps for adding fractions and subtracting fractions with different denominators. Step 1, we're going to have to find the lowest common denominator. Step 2, we're going to have to write equivalent fractions. The step 1 and step 2 are just like we did when we were putting fractions in order from least to greatest or greatest to least. Then after we have those equivalent fractions with their common denominators, we're going to add or subtract. And the last step of every fraction problem is always to simplify. You may need to press pause to write down these steps in your journal. Okay, question number 1 says 3/4 plus 1/5. Notice that my denominators are not equivalent, they're different. So I'm going to have to find a common denominator. When my denominators are not the same, I'm going to write my math problem vertically instead of horizontally. So in order to find the common denominator of 4 and 5, I'm going to count by 4s and count by 5s. Since 5 is one of my denominators, I know that all of my multiples of 5 have to end in a 5 or a 0. So I'm going to count by 4s until I come to a number that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. 20 ends in a 0. And I know if I count by 5s, I will also get to 20. So my common denominator, or my lowest common denominator, is 20. So next to each fraction, I'm going to put an equal sign in a fraction bar, and I'm going to list my common denominator. This is the exact same step that we did when we were putting fractions in order. So now I need to find my equivalent fractions. So I know that 4 times 5 is 20. So I have to multiply the numerator by the same thing. 3 times 5 is 15. So 3/4 and 15/20 are equivalent. Let's go to the second fraction. We know that 5 times 4 is 20. So I need to multiply the numerator by the same. 1 times 4 is 4. So 1/5 and 4/20 are equivalent. Notice now that my denominators are the same, I can add. 15/20 plus 4/20 is 19/20. My last step is to always see if I can simplify. I cannot simplify any further because my numerator is prime, 19 is prime, and it will not divide evenly into the denominator. Or you could tell me because they are 1 away. Let's try another. Number 2. Number 2 says 2/5 plus 8/30. My first step is going to be to find a common denominator. So I can count by 5s and count by 30s. I'm going to start with 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. I've already found a number they have in common, so I can stop. So I'm going to put my equals in my fraction bars. I'm going to put my lowest common denominator of 30. Now I'm going to find my equivalent fractions. 5 times 6 is 30, so times 6 for the numerator. So 2/5 is equivalent to 12/30. Notice I didn't have to change my denominator, so that's times 1. So remember, when I multiply by 1, it doesn't change anything. Now that I have common denominators, I can add. 12/30 plus 8/30 is 20/30. And my last step is to see if I can simplify. I notice that they both end in 0, so I can simplify by 10 to get 2/3. I know that 2/3 is in simplest form because my numerator and my denominator are 1 away, or you can tell me because they are both prime. I want you to pause and try number 3 on your own. When you're finished, hit play again to check your work. Alright, let's check number 3. Number 3 said 3/4 plus 2/3. The first thing you had to do was find a common denominator. So I'm going to count by 4s and count by 3s. 3, 6, 9, 12. I know that if I count by 4s, I will get to 12, so I'm going to stop. 4, 8, 12. So my lowest common denominator is 12. Next, you found your equivalent fractions. You should have said 4 times 3 was 12, so times 3 for the numerator. So 3/4 is equivalent to 9/12. And 3 times 4 was 12, so 2/3 is equivalent to 8/12. 9/12 plus 8/12 is 17/12. I hope you noticed that your answer was an improper fraction, so you had to simplify. So I know that 12 divides into 17 1 times. 1 times 12 is 12. 17 minus 12, I have 5 left over. My denominator stays the same. I notice that my numerator is prime, won't divide into my denominator, so 1 and 5/12 is in simplest form. Let's try some subtraction problems now. Number 4, 3/5 minus 1/6. My first step is to find a common denominator. So I'm going to count by 5s and I'm going to count by 6s. But I know all of my multiples of 5 are going to end in a 5 or a 0. So I'm going to count by 6s until I get to a number that ends in a 5 or a 0. So 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. I know that if I count by 5s, I will get to 30, so my lowest common denominator is 30. So I'm going to come back over to my original fractions and write my equivalent fractions, and I want to have a common denominator of 30. So now we need to write our equivalent fractions. So I know that 5 times 6 is 30, so I have to multiply the numerator by the same number. So 3/5 is equal to 18/30. I know that 6 times 5 is 30, so I multiply the numerator also. So 1/6 is equivalent to 5/30. Make sure you're paying attention. This one is a subtraction problem, so I'm going to subtract. 18/30 minus 5/30 is 13/30. Notice that my numerator is prime and it will not divide evenly to the denominator, so I know that my fraction is in simplest form. Let's try another. Number 5, 5/6 minus 3/8. My first step is to find my common denominator. So I'm going to count by 6s and count by 8s. 6, 12, 18, 24. I know in my head that if I count by 8s, I will get to 24, so I'm going to stop. 8, 16, 24. So my lowest common denominator is 24. So I'm going to come over to my original fractions and write my lowest common denominator next to each, which is 24. Then I'm going to write my equivalent fractions. So 6 times 4 is 24. So 5 times 4 is 20. 8 times 3 is 24. So 3 times 3 is 9. Notice it's a subtraction problem, so I'm going to subtract. 20 24ths minus 9/24 is 11/24. My last step is to see if I can simplify. I cannot simplify any further because my numerator is prime and it will not divide evenly into my denominator. So my answer is 11/24. Let's try a word problem this time. Number 6 says use the table to find the fraction of adopted dogs in one town that are either golden retrievers or mixed breeds. So I need golden retrievers and mixed breeds. So golden retrievers, 7/25 of the dogs were golden retrievers, and 2/5 of the dogs were mixed breeds. So I want to find out how many altogether were either golden retrievers or mixed breeds. So I'm going to add my two fractions together. So 7/25 plus 2/5. My first step is to find that common denominator. Well, I know if I count by fives, I will get to 25. So that tells me that 25 is going to be my common denominator. Now let's find our equivalent fractions. I know that 25 times 1 is 25, so my 7/25 stayed the same. I know that 5 times 5 is 25, so 2 times 5 is 10. I'm adding this time, so I have 6 plus 10/25, and that is 17/25. Now I need to see if I can simplify. Well, we know that 17 is prime, and 17 will not divide evenly into the denominator of 25, so I know my answer is in simplest form. Now this one is a word problem, so don't forget to label. So 17/25 of the dogs were golden retrievers or a mixed breed. Let's go one step further this time, and let's add 3 fractions together. Number 7 says use the table to find the fraction of the orders that were either vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. So I need to find out that vanilla, that 2/9 of the people preferred vanilla, chocolate, 1/6 of the people ordered chocolate, and then strawberry, 7/36 of the people ordered strawberry. So this time I have 3 fractions. So let's start with vanilla. Vanilla was 2/9. Then chocolate, which was 1/6. And then strawberry, which was 7/36. This time I'm going to have to find 3 equivalent fractions. So first thing I need to do is find my common denominator. So I'm going to count by 9s, by 6s, and by 36s. I'm going to start with 6. 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. I see that I have a 36 and a 36, so now I'm going to count by 9s to see if I can get to 36 also. So 9, 18, 27, 36. So my lowest common denominator for 9, 6, and 36 is 36. So let's write our common denominator underneath our fraction bars. Now we can write our equivalent fractions. 9 times 4 is 36, so 2 times 4 is 8. 6 times 6 is 36, so 1 times 6 is 6. I know that my denominator stayed the same, so that's a times 1. So 7/36 stayed the same. So now I need to add 8/36 plus 6/36 plus 7/36. So let's break it down. I know that 8 plus 6 is 14. 14 plus 7 is 21. So that gives me 36. Next, I need to check to see if I can simplify. And I notice that I can. They're both divisible by 3. So I'm going to simplify by 3's. 20 divided by 3 is 7. 36 divided by 3 is 12. So now I have 7/12. I know that 7/12 is in simplest form because my numerator is prime and won't divide into my denominator. It is a word problem, so I have to label. So 7/12 of the were vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry. Okay, it's time for you to try some examples on your own. Turn to your next blank page in your journal. Divide your paper into 8 equal boxes, and you need to solve one problem per box. When you are finished, you need to have them checked. Here are your 8 independent practice questions.